Welcome on in to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. This is the NFL Week 11 Fantasy Football Preview. Awesome slate of games, some really good stuff. We had an awesome slate last weekend as well, but I think this one rivals it in some respects. And I think especially I would like to see the momentum keep rolling for good Thursday night games. Last week's was a classic. And my bias aside, that was just amazing stuff going on Thursday night. And tonight, we had a pretty good one starting off in Philadelphia. We got the Eagles. We got the Commanders. Eagles 3.5-point favorites. Nice little over-under of 49.5. That's the consensus over-under. So looking like we're going to see some scoring this evening. Eagles obviously went into Dallas, and I don't think Dallas was going to be able to do much against almost anybody, but Philly really drove that point home a week ago, whereas the Commanders, they got the big test against the Steelers. I believe the Steelers were coming off the bye, a little bit of a rest advantage for them. They were able to beat Washington, but, not for that Johnny Newton play. Who knows what ends up happening in that particular matchup, but what are you seeing from a fantasy angle in this game?
It looks like Brian Robinson is back, correct? So
Yes.
That should be structurally important for Washington. I, of course, don't think Robinson is actually that good, but he, more than Austin Eckler, gives them a credible power running element, which was missing last week against the Steelers, and I think could have hurt Washington more than it did. Like, I think Eckler did a great job as a stopgap kind of replacement, but the Washington offense needs robust rushing volume, and you can't have a high volume rushing attack without using power elements at some point. And in the case of Washington, it's almost like primarily what they do. Like, they need to establish the power element between the tackles underneath up front so that it clears space on the sidelines and downfield, which is where Daniels is at his best throwing the ball. So we'll see. In theory, that should be kind of like a strength versus strength thing, because Philadelphia's run defense is looking pretty good, and Philadelphia's really strong defensive tackle rotation means they're better than most teams at stopping that power stuff, even without having to try to do it specifically. So if the corners keep playing well for the Eagles, this could be a pretty tough matchup for Washington, similarly difficult to what the Steelers were last week. And I don't know. I feel like the Eagles are still the team to beat in this division, but this game can obviously go a long way in clarifying whether that's true.
Yeah, I mean, Washington has been one of the best stories in football this year, and Philadelphia has had its moments where it looks, kind of like its 2022 form or the good part of last season. It's been a little bit trickier to trust them at other stages, but I think this is a big proving ground. I think with this one being at home at the Link, I do kind of give the nod to Philadelphia. I think, that all the firepower that they have offensively is going to be hard for Washington's defense to hold up against. I believe we have Jalen Hurts ranked as our QB1 for this week. So I'm expecting the Eagles to get it done this evening. I'm just hoping for a competitive game. I think Washington could be in kind of moral victory territory here. If they keep this one close, I think that still is a nice little feather in their cap.
Definitely. And if Daniels were to struggle against the Eagles, it wouldn't really be a moment to criticize over it, because to me, it looks like the Eagles' defensive strengths line up with the strengths of the Washington offense. And so it should be one of the tougher matchups for them.
No, exactly. I mean, you've seen that secondary that was much maligned last year definitely take a step forward when it comes to Philadelphia. So I think you could see a situation where Washington's kind of relative lack of depth among its pass catchers become like an issue here. As good as McLaurin is, and as nice of a story as Noah Brown has been, not against the Eagles. You know what I mean? So a little bit worried about that when it comes to Washington. Let's jump on over to Sunday. We got the Bears and the Packers. Boy, can you summarize just how bad the vibes are right now in Chicago?
I might not even be up to date myself. So they've fired Shane Waldron, right? And they're
Yes.
making Thomas Brown. I assume that's former Georgia running back Thomas Brown.
That's right.
pretty good Georgia running back Thomas Brown. I have no idea what Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator, is. I'm kind of skeptical that he's in a position to fix whatever is wrong with that offense. I think as much as Waldron probably was really uniquely bad at his job, it's, whatever the case, an extension of Eberflus. And I think Eberflus is a worm of a man. And I really have trouble believing that any team he oversees, especially from the position that they're in, it's like, They've had so many things go wrong. There are real problems that need actual fixing. At Eberflus's best, I think he can kind of whistle past a graveyard for you. Like, that's all he can really do. And pretending they don't have problems isn't enough right now. Like, they need some actual leadership, and Eberflus can't give it to them. So yeah, the Bears are a mess. The stuff about Tyson Bagent's dad is hilarious and 100% believable. Like, the only way you don't believe those stories is if you didn't see that guy on Hard Knocks. Otherwise, you would have just assumed you would have just assumed anytime you've seen a Tyson Bagent related news like thing about the Bears really like Bagent. It's like, oh yeah, his dad went and went howling up to some local radio station at a tailgate thing, had some stand, and he just literally crashes into it, wrecks all their stuff.
He proposed an arm wrestling match, kind of like being a hustler, like Color of Money, but for arm wrestling, getting into the radio booth and lo and behold, dropping some scoopage that, my son is the promised one, actually.
Yeah, so those reports, the sources for those reports were just what Tyson Bagent's dad was screaming in a tailgating parking lot anywhere in the Midwest, really. So yeah, that's all believable, and it's all a part of a real mess for the Bears. And I think the players are clearly good. I think, particularly in a case like DJ Moore's, it's like this guy's withstood every kind of bad NFL offense that there is, pretty much, with the Panthers. He's been productive throughout all of it. This is the first time in the NFL and college career, even after in his college career, DJ Moore's catching passes from like a fourth string quarterback that was a linebacker to start the year, no problem. But all of a sudden, Shane Waldron, Matt Eberflus, Caleb Williams can't catch a pass. It's like, what do we really think is the likely culprit here? Like, do we really think it's Caleb Williams? When, I don't know. We've seen DJ Moore produce with like PJ Walker. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and assume it's not the quarterback, but it's just the same. I'm going to assume the quarterback can't fix this level of team dysfunction.
No, I don't think so either. I think the Waldron firing is just a preamble to Eberflus being let go probably at the end of the season. The Bears apparently they really like to puff their chest out about the idea that they haven't fired a head coach in season ever or something like that. So they'll just wait. They'll just go ahead and ruin Caleb Williams' rookie season potentially, and beyond, just to keep that going. Our guy Lee points out that Caleb Williams needs more time. I assume that means in the pocket, and I agree with that. And I think in time, Caleb Williams will figure it out. But it's rough right now.
No one's getting open anyway. It's like you can give them all day, and it's the defense seems to know where everybody's running their routes. Also, I think that was that reference to the band Fear leaving. Anyway, that's I saw them mention the Melvins before too, which is you don't see that in most site comments. But anyway, I think that Caleb Williams needs a new GM, and I think it should be a coalition of like us and like-minded podcasters, needless to say, that should take that job.
Yeah, I mean, they've tried everything else and it failed. They need to give the podcasters a seat at the table. All this to say, how's this setting up for the Packers?
Oh, they're okay. They're fine. They're going to be okay. The Packers are going to win.
It's I think it's gone so bad in Chicago to where they were getting by with defense a little bit early on as the offense was finding its footing, but even the defense is kind of starting to struggle a little bit. So the Packers coming off the
collapse.
bye,
it's a full-on collapse.
That's kind of like the last wall that was standing for them, and it is collapsing, like you said. Let's grab a couple of questions here before we move on to the next game. Our guy Tyler, regular listener of ours, wants to know, just in a redraft league, are you comfortable starting 3 players from the same game? 2 of them in this case is going to be A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, you drafted those guys to start them, but Gonzalez being the kicker on the other side of this one tonight.
Yes, it's okay.
I think that's all right.
The kicker doesn't matter, and you always start Hurts and Brown. So
yeah, exactly. I think beyond that, I mean, you have the Commanders with an implied total that's, north of 20, so should be okay. Should get some scoring opportunities for that kicker. Josh wants to know, would you hold on to Xavier Legette or go grab someone like a Pop Douglas, Christian Watson, Kayshon Boutte, or Alec Pierce rest of season?
There's not a huge difference if there is one. For me, it would be between Legette, Watson, and Pierce, but I don't know if I would really be moved to actually change anything. I might just kind of stay with whatever I already have, but it would be between those 3 for me.
Yeah, they're all very much in the same bucket. I think Alec Pierce might draw my eye a little bit if it was still Flacco at quarterback, but don't believe that's going to be the case now. So, as much as I like Pop Douglas and Kayshon Boutte as talents, like, it's still a little bit tricky to
the Patriots have no idea what they're doing either. They keep changing their lineups every day. I mean, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, I agree. One more here. Jaden Reed or Devontae Smith? I'm sorry, it is a trade. Jaden Reed for Devontae Smith and Rachaad White.
I guess I prefer the Smith and White side just because I don't see a huge difference between Reed and Smith or any. So I guess the side with the extra player, maybe. Yeah,
and White's still got some utility, especially if it's PPR. Before we move on to our next game, we got a message from our pal Nick Whalen. He's going to tell you about DraftKings Pick 6.
We're proud to be brought to you by DraftKings Pick 6. So many NFL offerings each week over at Pick 6. Been enjoying playing on the Pick 6 platform each and every week of the NFL season. Think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash right now with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. Yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in those picks and compete against opponents for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK. Again, ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. If you're a new Pick 6 customer, play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Just use that code ROTOPICK. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-89-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
See those terms, baby. All right, moving on. We got the Jags. We got the Lions. At the Lions, biggest favorite, I think, of the entire season thus far. A healthy 14 points at Bet Rivers, 13 at some other shops. But either way, the Lions are supposed to win this game by a lot. We're going to see Mac Jones out there for the Jaguars.
Game, Craig Reynolds game.
Yeah, I mean, go down the list. I mean, it can be I wouldn't even bet against an offensive lineman scoring a touchdown for the Lions.
Dan Skipper is going to score at least one. It's 1.5. It's not 0.5.
It's setting the line. Boy, I guess the main angle here is what do you do if you have any of these kind of higher profile Jaguars guys?
Well, I guess with Thomas, he was going late enough that your team might be doing pretty good with him, despite the slow couple weeks here. Nothing wrong with starting Brian Thomas or Travis Etienne, in my opinion, or I guess even Evan Ingram. But just the same, you're not compelled to do anything in particular with them.
Yeah, I can't start any of the Jags confidently.
Fair enough. With Thomas in particular, the draw is that it only takes one play, really. And those Lions corners are definitely really aggressive and are not fast enough to be as aggressive as they are and always get away with it forever. But yeah, you're banking on like garbage time or some kind of thing like that bailing you out, because there's no reason to believe that the Jaguars in structure do anything at all in this game.
No, I don't think so either. We don't have to spend too much time on this one. Let's jump over to slightly more competitive game, but still one of the bigger spreads of the week. Raiders, Dolphins at home, 7-point favorites. Dolphins got an interesting win this past week on Monday Night Football against the Rams. The offense has looked competent, maybe not amazing, since Tua Tagovailoa's return.
Defense stepped up a little bit.
I agree with that, and I'm liking the Dolphins as a streaming defense this week personally. If they're bouncing around, which there's probably a decent likelihood that they were available in your league, but what are you looking at for this game?
Yeah, the Raiders are terrible. Nothing new. A guy like Jacoby Myers, I think you can like him for volume-related reasons. Bowers, of course, you like. But a player like Madison, I don't think you're compelled to start him. It's like he's flex viable, but never more than that. The Miami side, I don't know what to make of their offense exactly. Like that's the danger for the Dolphins in this game is that their offense continues to struggle. And against this defense, the Raiders defense, that would be a really bad sign. Like even a less than great offense should be able to clean up here. Maybe they will, but the ongoing risk thing with Tyreek Hill isn't ideal, and we'll see what's going on with Tua, Waddle, all that. This offense clearly is not right. But if the Dolphins become what we had recently, come to know as the Dolphins, they should just sort of annihilate the Raiders.
They really should. I think the one thing that's stopping me is Antonio Pierce has been good as a road coach so far with the Raiders.
I still like him. I still like Pierce. I think he's been truly, by a classic reading of the words, been set up by Tom Telesco and those other idiots with the Raiders. But yeah, Pierce is the realness, but that team is just so worn down. They might not have Nate Hobbs in this game, and he's probably their best defensive back. So
right.
A lot of ways for the Raiders to blow it here.
That's a particularly interesting detail here because the rest of the corners can be picked on pretty easily for the Raiders, and that's trouble when you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And I think Jonnu Smith has kind of put himself on the startable radar among tight ends as well at this point.
Yeah, I think the slot, the seam threat was there for the Dolphins. They had Waddle and Hill doing all these crossing route things from the boundary, and they would eat up a lot of real estate, but the seam, the middle of the field, had never been utilized. And I think that sort of collapsed on the Dolphins offense this year. I think getting Jonnu going the last few weeks is specifically going to open some things up, especially if defenses don't respond to Jonnu. But yeah, their three wide loadout should basically be Hill, Waddle on the boundary, and Smith in the slot, because that's the best way to keep Hill and Waddle where they've been productive in the first place and tap into a new territory without encroaching on the first two.
There we have it. Let's jump over to Rams Patriots. I think this is one of the more confounding matchups of the entire weekend. The Patriots looked good last week. They return home. The Rams, short week, long flight to get there. The Rams 4.5-point favorites, over under sitting at 43.5. I think the main crux of the matter here is are the Rams going to be able to get it done in this setup against a Patriots team that seems to be playing a little bit better of late?
Yeah, the Patriots have a certain amount of grit to them. They're not completely without talent. They've got some good players, but their issue is, of course, they can't block on offense, and most weeks they struggle to stop the run on defense. So I don't know if it was this game. Christian Barmore is supposed to get back soon, which is actually a huge deal. He's probably one of the, 5 to 8 best defensive tackles in the NFL. So if he was available, that would change the complexion of that New England defense quite a bit. But otherwise, yeah, they kind of need their corners to bail out the defense. They need those corners to be so good in coverage that they don't need any help, which allows them to put more toward the run game. It'll be interesting to see how that works here because, of course, I don't think Kyron Williams is very good. I think that Sean McVay really hurts that team by refusing to make an effort to make the backfield more productive, especially because you can't make Kupp and Nakua more productive than they already are. What are you going to do? Have 2 1,900-yard receivers on offense? Is that all you need to get over the hump? Because if you do, you'll never get there. But anyway, even Williams should be able to be productive against the Patriots run defense if he gets the volume option. But if you're the Patriots defense, you can definitely put a little toward the run. I guess the problem is Nakua or Kupp, one of the two will always be against Jonathan Jones, who's rather small at corner, but whoever's against Christian Gonzalez, I mean, they might not do a whole lot in that game.
Yeah, he has quickly established himself as a really tough cover. Obviously, it's really tough to trust many of these Patriots pass catchers on a week-to-week basis other than Hunter Henry, but where's the line of demarcation for you, like for Drake May? Would you bench him in one quarterback formats almost exclusively? Is there a case for him to be made as a sneaky DFS play this week?
Right. I mean, the Rams defense is still really bad in the secondary. I think Drake May is good. If it's normally a limitation that the Patriots don't have great wide receivers, it might not be a limitation in this case, in this particular matchup, because the Rams corners are, they're accommodating. But the problem with May, or one potential problem with May, is like last week, the Patriots didn't even try to run a 3-wide offense very much, and they would rotate that second receiver spot depending on what that play call was. And that bugs me because it's going to tip off the play calls eventually. Like they gave 59 snaps to Kayshon Boutte, who's their ex-receiver and plays every snap. And then the next leading snap at receiver was KJ Osborne with 27. And then Douglas and Polk both had 25, So it's like they need one guy with 59 and then another with 45 or 50, or else they're going to start tipping off the play call. So I don't trust the Patriots offense at all right now. Pretty much would just be Stevenson and Henry that I'd be looking at. But if you have to start May, you could do worse because the talent is good and he can run. He can run a lot actually.
I'm having to start Drake May in the Fish Bowl, but I think that's really the only.
You definitely. That's a place where you start him. Yeah.
Yeah, because
and you don't.
Unfortunately, I drafted Trevor Lawrence in that one, but I did finally get vindicated for. I guess it's happened a couple of times, but it really happened last week. I started with like a Burrow Chase. Combo in that one, and everyone's like, well, that's not how you do it. Well, what if they're all scoring a bunch of touchdowns?
They said in Fish Bowl?
Yeah, they're just I don't know.
I think you're supposed to take those two all the no matter what format it is.
I know if you can get them both, it's worthwhile. And we'll get to that Bengals game a little bit later on. Let's hit the Browns Saints down in New Orleans. This is a tricky one to figure out as well. Some books have the Saints as the favorites. Others have the Browns as the favorites. I tend to think, and this is very soft sciencey of me, but if the Browns were playing the Saints last week and this was the first game after the coach firing, I'd be worried about the Browns. But I think they got that boost out of the way, and the Saints end up looking like the Saints yet again this coming Sunday against the Browns.
I would probably see it that way too. With a guy like Jameis Winston, there's always the risk that he's just going to give the game away. Just no reason at all. No prompting, give it away. But Derek Carr does that every so often too. And I think the difference is that while I would expect the Saints run defense to improve over the course of the year, like I don't think it's quite as bad as it was in that first 6 weeks. The Cleveland run defense is good just in general. Like they don't need to get better to be good enough. And yeah, the bounce, the dead cat bounce, it already happened. So I guess I'll go with the Browns. Not expecting it to be a clean game, but they can get some big plays every once in a while from the passing game, and Chubb should be, a stress to the Saints' run defense.
I could see this being the first game that Chubb really looks like himself. I think there's been maybe like an over criticism of Chubb's performance thus far, but you got to kind of think about.
Are people doing that? I missed that, but that'd be kind of funny.
Well, there's been a little bit of like, why isn't he just Nick Chubb right away? It takes a little bit of time. It's kind of like a miracle that he's even out there.
Yeah, why didn't he just be Nick Chubb? The same people who are like, he'll never play again. Like, why isn't he just the best running back ever in his first game back? Even if against the Ravens and the Chargers, then those run defenses are really good. Yeah, that's a good one. Also, the Browns offense is still a mess. This is not the plan that they have here. They've already tanked. They traded Amari Cooper, But whereas the last two matchups for Chubb were really difficult, this one against the Saints should be, relatively manageable in comparison.
And I think it helps that he had the bye week. Like, that's just extra time to get, closer back to his old form.
Hopefully. So whenever Chubb does well, the lamest people in the world get a tummy ache, So let's hope for it.
Yeah, we'll be sending them Tums in the mail. Let's go to Ravens Steelers. This one is going to be pretty wild. The Ravens 3-point favorites on the road. Tomlin, always great. As a dog, the favored team in this matchup almost always loses. It's always just a slugfest. I think that this, you could argue, is really the best matchup between these two in the regular season in close to a decade, because they haven't necessarily been at the peak of their respective powers at the same time over that time frame. But, I mean, this is hugely important for the AFC North. This is the first time they've met this season. Steelers are playing well. Ravens are playing well, but they have, the elephant in the room is that secondary is so bad. And when you have Russell Wilson as opposed to Justin Fields, that's an offense that can test that defense.
Right. I still find it weird, the whole thing with the Ravens pass defense struggling so much, because I still think that when you go player by player in the secondary, it's good personnel, and the result has not been good. So, at some point something has to give. I guess it's either like I have to assume that I was wrong to rate those players as high as I did, or the results have to start getting better. You see some of these passes they give up, it's like zone coverages where I assume they still are screwing up the handoffs or identifying who's supposed to take who or whatever, because it shouldn't be this difficult. And I don't know if it's Zach Orr, is that the name of the defensive coordinator? I don't know if it's like he's got a scheme that's more ambitious than what he's able to get, acclimated in time for the games. I don't know if it's something like that. But if they don't get better, then it's kind of Orr's fault, I think. The Steelers, either way, I'm wondering if they are not really the team to hurt the Ravens pass defense, because if so many of the Ravens pass defense screw ups are these, crossing routes in 3 wide looks, where they're just cutting the guy loose across the second half of the field, then the Steelers are probably the wrong offense to threaten the Ravens, because going 2-3 tight ends kind of goes away from what's been hurting the Ravens the most. It's like spreading the field, giving them a complex assignment. That's where they seem to screw up their zones. But if you're running if you're running max protect every time, what is there to screw up? You double team Pickens, you keep an eye on Freiermuth, and everyone knows you can pretty much ignore everybody else with a few exceptions. So I don't know. I see this as not an easy game for the Steelers offense. I think it could be kind of a low scoring game on both sides. What I have more trouble trying to guess is whether this new Ravens offense is finally one good enough to beat the Steelers defense, which I don't think it ever really has under Lamar Jackson. So We had something similar recently with the Dolphins always play terrible on offense against Sean McDermott until this one time that they played pretty well recently. Maybe something like that is due to happen here with the Ravens, but I don't know. I feel like the Steelers are more than going to be ready for it, and I can't see either side pulling away in this game, and so I don't really have any leaning.
My guess is that this is, like you said, going to be very close, and I think in my mind's eye envision the Steelers picking up like a really critical third or fourth down to ice
They do
it
that
through the
stuff.
air. Yeah. So that's just kind of how I see it. But for fantasy, I like Pickens a lot this week. I like Freiermuth a lot. I don't think either team's going to run the ball great. I mean, you're still starting Derrick Henry, maybe Najee Harris you feel a little bit queasy about depending on your other options. But Lamar Jackson should have a fine game. Zay Flowers should be fine. Mark Andrews is coming along pretty nicely as well. So, yeah, it's going to be a slobber knocker. I don't expect it to challenge that 48.5 total. I think that this one, maybe low 40s.
That's high.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be the highest.
Unless it's the Ravens cover, I don't think that one's going over.
No, I don't either. But either way, really, really excited for that one. Before we get on to our next matchup, we've got a message from our friends over at Circa. The end of the season is getting closer, but you can catch the big game poolside at Circa Stadium Swim at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. 6 temperature-controlled pools, a massive 143-foot screen, and booming game sound. Plus, view the pyrotechnics and visual effects throughout the game. Grab the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Stadium Swim's big game viewing party is February 9th, only at Circa Resort and Casino. Space is going fast, so you got to reserve your spot today. Go to circalasvegas.com. Check out Stadium Swim. Indeed, a fine place to catch a game. Also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. And wouldn't you know it, we're on to Vikings Titans. So this game features a player in Calvin Ridley that our patient listener Gary wanted to hear about. So he's got kind of a wide receiver quandary where we we have a lot of receivers in a very similar bucket between Ridley, Jacoby Myers, who we already talked about a little bit, Juwan Jennings, and Darnell Mooney. So game script wise, does this set up as poorly as I think it might for Ridley, despite the fact that he's playing much better lately? Oop. Sorry, I think I got you muted. I think you got yourself muted there, Mario. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think that the matchup is more difficult than the game script in the case of the Vikings because they're quick to blitz, quick to hit style of play is just kind of the last thing that Ridley wants to see. But as far as which of those guys to actually play, I'm sorry, that's a tough one. I guess maybe not Mooney given the matchup, but I don't really know how to call the rankings on that one. I might go with like Jennings, but Ridley is a fine. Ridley, I guess, would be like the target-based projection pick because he's definitely going to keep getting a really high share of the targets with the Titans. It's just the only risk with Ridley is is he going to have another stretch where he catches like 3 of 12 targets?
And I mean, I have to think that the Titans will be playing from behind, and really Ridley's pretty much all they got as far as those pass catchers go. So
I would not feel bad about playing Ridley. Like it's a difficult question to feel strong about one more than the other, but as far as like the justification of playing Ridley alone is like that's easy. The justification is definitely there.
Yeah, and I think in Mooney's case, like if Surtain is shadowing Drake London, then maybe that opens Mooney up a little bit more. I would try to start 2 of those guys, maybe one of them in the flex. I would imagine that you have one receiver that a star top 10 type of receiver in your wide receiver 1 spot. But if you're starting 3 receivers, I'd start 2 of those guys or find a way to flex one of them. Jennings versus Mooney is definitely tricky. I might side Mooney, but yeah. All right. So sorry, thinking out loud there. But going back to the focus on this game. What's going on with the Vikings right now? Because they're racking up tons of yards every single week, but they're really kind of struggling to score. Like Nick Whalen brought up a great point on our betting pod last week earlier today, that the Vikings have racked up 800 some odd yards of offense over the last 2 weeks against Indianapolis and against Jacksonville, but they've got 35 points to show for it. Severely outgaining the opposition, but not really capitalizing on the scoreboard. Does that correct a little bit this week against the Titans?
I don't know if this Darnold hand thing has anything to do with why he struggled last week, but last week you definitely saw the bad Sam Darnold, and if he keeps playing at that level, it's going to be difficult for the Vikings to maintain, the pace that they showed in the first half of the year. I think that the matchup is good enough here. It's still easy to play decent quarterback when you've got Justin Jefferson and then these other options to throw to. Generally, Kevin O'Connell does a good job. So it's not easy to go to Tennessee, and maybe the hand is a little bit of a limitation, but Darnold has no real good excuse for failing here, and the Tennessee offense is so bad, so unreliable, that I think we can assume Minnesota will get some short fields. And even if Darnold has a bad game, if Minnesota's getting the shorter fields, they're going to, take care of business here. It's just, are we going to get the ugly Minnesota from last week, or are we going to get, the Minnesota from the first 6 weeks that was sort of one of the more intimidating teams in the league?
Exactly. So I think the Vikings defense is going to, keep the Titans probably below 20 points.
Titans are terrible. It's really easy to bounce back against a team like this, even if they already almost blew it against the Jags.
Yeah. So let's say that this is the week that the Vikings kind of quiet the doubters. I don't know if the doubters will ever go away, but just maybe turn them down a few notches this week. Next up, we've got the Colts and the Jets. Would you believe it? This was going to be the Sunday night football game. Can you imagine if we were subjected to that?
They should do it. They should flex it back. It's what we deserve.
It is.
Give us our slop. We will eat it.
No question. Of course we'll eat it. But, oh, man. Well, I've had enough of it with the Jets.
It's so funny that they lost against the Cardinals. Man, what a ridiculous well-cursed organization. They earned it. It's good to see someone get what they deserve. But the Colts are pretty messed up, of course, themselves. And sorry, what is the latest with are they back to
my understanding is they're back to Richardson.
Okay, so I don't see that as helpful. I feel like there were real issues that had to do with Richardson, and Flacco has a whole host of different issues, but he definitely resolved some of the ones that are unique to Richardson. And the Colts would project poorly against a team with the last two defenses, specifically the Vikings and the Bills. It's like, this is exactly the two defenses, or among the two defenses you would name as being the worst fits for the Flacco offense. This Flacco offense does way better against teams. Not that the Jets are easier in comparison, but just some defense that isn't good in the underneath. That's where Flacco is at his best, but he can't push the ball downfield, whereas Richardson's the other way around. He can only push the ball downfield. So either way, the Colts can only be bailed out by their running game, saving them. And Jonathan Taylor almost did it last week, but he could not do it for the entire game. So, I don't know. The Colts are just kind of a bad team right now. So the Jets being the same makes it difficult to call this, but I feel like this should have been a game that the Colts could have just won, and now I don't know. It's hard to see either team ever winning again, I guess.
Well, I feel like if Jonathan Taylor can get going here, which is definitely possible with how the Jets defense is played, I think there's a pretty stark split for how the Jets defense is played post Robert Saleh getting fired. It's not a good unit right now. They're playing much less than the sum of their parts, and I think there's a way in which Indianapolis can win there, and I think the Jets just it's hard to be confident in them. It's hard to look at the number and be like, yeah, I'm gonna lay 4 points with this team right now.
They are basically not a team. They are not a functional NFL team. So it's fair to point out, these various talented players that the Jets have. It's like that's fine, but you may as well think of them as like a team that doesn't run practices during the week. It's like they are so unstable that the talent just does not show up on the field the way that it should. So given that those stability issues are owed to obvious sources that are still present with the team, I don't see anything getting better with the Jets until at the very least Joe Douglas has to go. It's like maybe some other GM can tame Aaron Rodgers and get him to behave, but this has been a complete circus, just an unbelievable failure by everybody.
And well, at least we're not getting subjected to it on national TV anymore, at least for this week. We've definitely got enough. Yeah, I'm good on that. Moving forward into the afternoon window, just 3 games in the afternoon on Sunday. We've got the Falcons and Broncos, kind of a fun matchup between these two. Rematch of what, Super Bowl 33? The Tim Dwight game?
38, I think.
No, that's too late. 38 would be somewhere in
the... Oh, no, wait,
yeah,
you're right. 33, my bad. Yeah.
Nailed it. Look at that.
Yeah.
None of those players are going to be playing in this game, unfortunately. But we've got the Broncos home favorites. They obviously took the Chiefs to the mat last week, but the Chiefs voodoo magic won out. And then the Falcons, they go into New Orleans and they were just they leave all the points on the board with Younghoe Koo for getting out a kick. Pretty tough one from them, but the Falcons can always kind of find a way to do something of that ilk. But how do you see it playing out in this matchup for fantasy purposes?
Well, the Denver defense is tough, and the Falcons offense is at once, we'd probably call them above average, but I don't think we find them to be perfectly reliable all the time. Like, it feels like they're sort of still, even now, sort of finding themselves a little bit, and the Broncos defense is not, the kind of defense that you want to have to find yourself against. So if you're not locked in, the Broncos defense can kind of make you have a bad day. And as far as this matchup goes, it can negate the difference, the advantage that the Falcons otherwise have. It's like the Falcons defense is probably good enough to hold down the Broncos offense. So if the Falcons have like a clear way of getting a win here, it's that their offense is some amount better than the Broncos. But Kirk Cousins, if he has one of his off days, it's like this is the wrong defense to have an off day against, because it'll, you'll pay for your mistakes. And I don't know, it's hard for me to write off the Broncos, even though they're the worst team of the two.
I think the big keys are just how guys like Pitts and Mooney can kind of counterbalance if Drake London is effectively neutralized by Pat Surtain. So that's going to be something I'm keeping a close eye on when the Falcons have the ball. And well, from fantasy angle, kind of like the waiver wire news du jour of the week, Audric Estime, a guy that we liked in the pre-draft process and everything like that. I have a couple 18th round best ball shares and all that, but I'm seeing an over-under on his rushing yardage prop at like 58.5. That's more than Kenneth Walker this week, and I'm not sure you can just trust that the Broncos are going to go to him that heavily, especially if he has a slow start.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Sean Payton is ever doing, especially nowadays, and I don't know what the basis was for moving from Javonte Williams to Estime. Like, we weren't as big of Javonte Williams fans as prospect as probably most people, but to me, he's still clearly a better player than Estime, and I don't know what Javonte Williams did wrong. Like, why even give him the one carry? Like, what did that one carry happen, and then walking off the field, Javonte Williams like said something to Peyton? Like, that's what would make more sense than what they did or what they appeared to do. And Estime still wasn't even that good himself. I mean, I know it was a tough defense, but who cares about 53 yards on 14 carries? Like, this isn't moving to the point that it's worth benching Williams. But for fantasy purposes, I don't trust any of them. And if it's going to be left up to merit, then I think it goes back to Javonte Williams again, because Javonte Williams is probably better than Estime. And I don't know. I don't trust any of them.
Yeah, I would have to be in a pretty deep league, I think, to think about Estime this week. Maybe I'm wrong there, but something's going on there.
Peyton's just kind of losing it, and he's flailing.
Especially with they've definitely done better than I expected. You watch week 1 and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a new level of circus. But they've righted the ship mostly as far as the results go. But the backfield stuff has been one of the more confounding.
And they're being carried by the defense. It's like a rerun of the Nate Hackett season. It's like the offensive genius is supposed to do his job and won't. And even like their good stretch for the Broncos lately, it's like it only feels like a good stretch because of how low the expectations were set by the first couple weeks. And those first couple weeks were just horrendous. So it's just one of those things. It's like failing in weeks 1 and 2 has set up this relative sense of, oh, they're getting better though, and it's kind of like, yeah, but they still suck. And if it wasn't for the whole league being terrible, we might have more time to notice the way that the Broncos are failing. But yeah, it's in this era of mass failure, it's kind of easy to miss how bad Sean Payton's offenses have been there.
Yeah, it's very not conventional. It doesn't look like anybody else's. That's for sure. Let's move on over. We've got the Seahawks and the 49ers. Niners 6.5-point favorites at home. They obviously met earlier this season on a Thursday night. Niners won that one fairly handily, if I remember correctly. That was the Garendo game, sliding down at the 1. So it could have been uglier on the scoreboard potentially. The Seahawks off a bye, and I think most critically, a little bit healthier. I think DK was practicing in full as of Wednesday. So it looks like he should be back at the very least. That's got to help. But the Niners have really kind of had the Seahawks number over the last few years.
Yeah, Metcalf being back is huge, though, and the 49ers are still without Charvarius Ward at corner. So if Ward is still out, that's a big deal for the 49ers because Ward is who best matches up with Metcalf. Like Diamador Lenore, who they just gave the big contract extension to, he moves to the slot and nickel formations for a reason, and it's that he's kind of stout, doesn't really have much reach. He's not a bad athlete, but Lenore is more squatty than he is long, and he's not quite fast. And you want length, you want speed when you're going against DK Metcalf, and Ward is their length speed corner. So no Ward is setting up Metcalf for a fast start in his first game back, even against this 49ers defense that we think is quite good. But aside from everything else, I don't know. It's tough to figure out because the 49ers have been so weird all year. If their offense basically gets rolling the way that it should, then that's all we need to know in this game, I think. It's just like whatever the Seahawks can strike back with, it's less than what the 49ers will put up if the 49ers are moving the ball the way they should. And I guess that's what I kind of expect to happen, given that it's kind of crunch time. Shanahan, he might be a fallible coach, but he's good at getting this team ready to go when the stakes are high, and they're still high. The Seahawks being a desperate divisional opponent, I don't think changes anything, especially when the 49ers just have the better team overall.
Yeah, the Seahawks are just a little bit too high variance for me, and the 49ers, even if they're not as good as a year ago, they do have McCaffrey back.
They're surging at the moment. Like they're going to constantly figure things out over the upcoming weeks, and I think it's just it's bad luck that the Seahawks are catching the 49ers in this stretch where it's a series of must-win games for them.
Right. Yeah, bad timing there. Arguably game of the week, we got Chiefs-Bills, this one in Buffalo. Bills favored, but real shorthanded potentially as far as the pass catchers available for Josh Allen. Keon Coleman being ruled out, Amari Cooper still dealing with that wrist. Dalton Kincaid, I don't think was practicing as of Thursday. So that really hurts. I think for even as bad of a season as Kincaid has had, there's one kind of small weakness in this Chiefs defense. It's been their ability to defend tight ends, at least from a fantasy perspective. The numbers point to that, but I don't know. Josh Allen's going to have to be Superman again here.
Yeah. It would be big, though, if Cooper is back. If Cooper's in, then I really don't care about Kincaid being out. But yeah, if Cooper is still out and then Kincaid is a new absence, that kind of sucks. Spencer Brown at right tackle, I guess, is worth keeping an eye on. But this Chiefs defense, it's brutal timing that the Bills have these receiver injuries, because I think it is depth receiver specifically where you need to hurt this Chiefs defense, because it seems like no one can run on them. And the only limitation they really have in the pass defense is at corner, because they let L'Jarius Sneed walk, and then they sort of just didn't replace him, and Jalen Watson's been hurt. So their corner depth is where they're most beatable. It's pretty much just Trent McDuffie. And even if McDuffie is on Cooper, and even if McDuffie succeeds in basically eliminating Cooper from the game, Shakir against those, kind of backup corners, Josh Allen being the quarterback throwing to him, I think there's ways that the Bills can do some damage from like 3 wide type formations. So if Cooper is one of those 3 receivers, then I think the loss of Kincaid is negligible, since they'd be going away from the 2 tight end and more toward the 1 tight end look. I don't know what to make of as always, I don't know what to make of the Chiefs offense. Definitely expect Hopkins to have a better game here than he did against Surtain last week, but I don't know. The Chiefs with Hopkins too. The Chiefs are limited to the underneath, especially, like they're not going downfield a whole lot with Hopkins. And the Bills' defense is built to crash that range of the field. It's more like Xavier Worthy that the Bills wouldn't have an answer for if they can so much as get Worthy a clean release here. So if you're the Chiefs, I think you need to start. You need to loosen up that Bills defense. You need to get them out of that pouncing stance and get them on their heels a little bit for once, because if you can't, they can sort of, they're ready to jump on you all day. And I don't have any faith in the Chiefs' offensive run game at the moment.
There have been times, maybe it's just anecdotal, where I feel like I see them, moving piles, getting space for Kareem Hunt to get going and everything, but it's
he's in quicksand. He's toast. I mean, they've given him big volume and he's held up with it. But the only reason anyone thinks Hunt is playing well is because he gets the ball a bunch of times in games that the Chiefs win. But you could have given Carson Steele those same carries and they probably would have won the same games.
I do chuckle every time I'm watching the Chiefs and I see Carson Steele in at fullback. So that really hurts some people's feelings.
He had so many broken tackles per attempt in the preseason, though.
That's a stat you got to hang your hat on. That's sticky. That's one that always translates to the regular season. Let's hit the prime timers. We got the Bengals and the Chargers. This one's going to be a lot of fun. We got the Chargers 1.5 point favorites. I can't quit the Bengals. I know that the Chiefs, the Chargers are playing well. They're starting to kind of flex their. Yes, but the Bengals keep losing.
Yeah, they are losing a lot.
But I feel like they're like so close to breaking through and making this run. They're basically
they could have had better luck than they have had.
Sure,
certainly.
Yeah, I mean, no question about that. Play the Ravens close 2 times and lose by what, like a combined 4 points. Some other weird games that the traditional.
They might get Higgins back, maybe. Knock on wood.
This is
a
true.
Lot.
Yeah, I mean, if he's back, let's say that he is. How do you view this game?
I think I'd take the Bengals to win. Maybe I'm reducing it a little too much, but when you see one of those stats like this team is 2-7 in their last 9 games of 1 score or less determining the winner, a lot of the times that just turns out being, they go 7-2 for the next 9. And especially when you can put up points like the Bengals did against the Ravens and have it go as close, losing only because basically they ran into this buzzsaw of, Lamar Jackson having his best season yet after winning 2 MVPs already. It's like if they don't run into that buzzsaw, they probably just win that game. And if the Chargers are not also a buzzsaw, then the Chargers are the ones in danger here. I think the Chargers are a team that overachieves every single week, and the Bengals are a team that usually underachieves a little bit. But the Chargers need to overachieve just to be competitive every week. Like, they don't have as much ammo talent-wise as a lot of other teams. And whereas with the Bengals, it's more like we expect them to just be better than they've been because they have enough. The players that they have already been better than this in the past. So the Chargers, in a way, are sort of due for a little bad luck of their own. It's like they are, yes, built to win close games, and they're built to do better than most teams consistently in those crucial situations, but they won't get it right every time forever, And just those corners with the Chargers were not that great. And then Asante Samuel got hurt. I guess they're getting Christian Fulton back, but even he's like maybe a 50 grade corner. Chase and if Higgins is back, then Chase and Higgins should just be a lot for this defense to withstand, and I don't think they can.
That's what I'm thinking. I think the Bengals, the numbers are there as far as their offensive production. The defense is not good, but I'm not sure that the Chargers are explosive enough to like fully exploit it. So I think this one ends up being a little bit lower scoring than the total might suggest. But I do think that the Bengals escape with a win and get a little bit of wind in their sails going into Week 12. Let's finish it out. We've got the Texans and the Cowboys. This one's kind of a bummer of a Monday nighter, but
yeah, how do they not flex this one to the toilet when they got rid of that other one?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's going to be no Dak Prescott. We're getting more Cooper Rush on national TV. So that's
Texans
exciting.
are pretty bad right now, but I don't think they're bad enough to lose to Cooper Rush.
Do they win by more than a touchdown though? That's the line. It's 7.5.
Sure. I don't know. Yeah.
I'll go with it. I think
yeah. I can't see Dallas scoring like 10 points. So if I think of it that way, like I can imagine the Texans getting to 20 somehow.
I think Mixon could have a really nice day. I don't think
Mixon could have a huge game. Yeah, he could go for like 250.
So yeah, the Cowboys just can't stop the run, and I think going to Mixon makes a lot of sense here. I think Nico Collins should be back, and if you're in the prop game, or if you're really kind of stressed at tight end this week, I do think you could do worse than Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, you're right though. You're right. It just sucks. I hear his name and it's Ipecac.
I'm dumpster diving for a dumpster diver game. So, you got to lean in sometimes. But on that note, that's going to end it for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Be sure to check out Friday's edition before you set your DFS lineups. I always listen to that pod over the weekend, and I always at least cash a little bit on Sundays for my DFS lineups. Those guys elevate my game from terrible to passable. So definitely give that a listen. Add that to your weekend rotation. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.